We take you now to issues of parliament and state capture. 4 ANC MPs implicated in the Zondo Commission have been let off the hook. The Parliament's Ethics Committee has cleared the House Chair Cedric Frolick, Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi, the former Minister Mosebenzi, Zwane and MP Winnie Ngwenya of any wrongdoing. Now, the committee found that the 4 did not breach the Code of Ethical Conduct. Let's discuss this with co-chair of the Ethics Committee, Mr. Bekizwe Nkosi. A very good afternoon, or rather good morning to you. Thank you for your time today. I was reading through your press statement and your press release regarding this situation. And there's a phrase that I found quite interesting, if I may just share that with you. You say it's important for you to preserve trust in individuals, and that is what your ethics committee tries to do, and that is the desired outcome of your investigations. This caught my attention because should your priorities not be so much about preserving trust not in individuals but in the institution itself and its ability to be able to regulate itself, its ability to be able to hold members of parliament to account, as opposed to trying to maintain the integrity of individuals, but rather maintaining the integrity of the institution itself?
Thank you and good morning, Tamifa, and thank you for hosting us. I must indicate that the Ethics Committee does not look at members as affiliates or members of particular political parties. When we deal with issues, we deal with members as members of parliament who have taken an oath to uphold law, ethics, and any other legislation applicable. Secondly, at all times we act in a manner that does ensure the integrity, trust, and confidence of people in parliament. We have never done anything that suggests otherwise. Thirdly, in relation to us investigating matters, we go through a thorough process where we give the complainant the opportunity to place their complaint, investigate, liaise with other institutions that may help shed light, and require those people to provide us with additional information and give them out before the committee. Thereafter, we consider all issues, all information before us, before we arrive at the decision. So it is not a flimsy approach. It is an approach that is engaged, involved, requires a lot of resources in terms of personnel, but also in terms of just as members applying our minds independently and without bias on the issues.
Let's start with one of the issues, that of Mr. Thulas Nxesi. This was obviously in relation to the asbestos issue, Edwin Sodi having used his name as a reference for one of the deposits. What the information we have is that Mr. Nxesi got an affidavit where he proclaimed that the money was not for himself, but instead it went to a family that was in need. Over and above the affidavit that was submitted to you as a portfolio committee, what other steps did you take in order to verify that information and to ascertain the merits of this particular case?
Yeah, it's confirmed. We did receive the affidavit from Honorable Nxesi, but secondly, we required him, in addition, to prove to us that indeed the money didn't come to his account. He provided receipts or invoices of the amounts paid directly to, I think, Sanwat Primary or High School, which indicated that the money moved from Sodi to Sanwat High School. And secondly, the other amount moved from Sodi to a Mrs. I think, I can't remember the name exactly, but these were to pay for fees and or accommodation for people in his constituency which were destitute. Our investigation didn't indicate that the money came to him. We therefore accepted as a reasonable explanation that he acted in the interest of members of his community or constituency who he thought were in destitute. For him to breach the conduct, the money should have been paid to him directly and not declared.
Mr. Nkosi, what are the guidelines? Do you have any guidelines currently in place for members to be able to assist, whether members of the community or a particular NGO? What are the regulations around that? Because oftentimes we are finding that this is used as one of the reasons why money flows should be let off the hook, because they didn't go to the member themselves but went to an NGO, a particular student that was in need, or a family that was in need. How do you track the money, and how do you ensure that that is not a loophole for you?
The guidelines that we have currently as a committee are in our Code of Ethics document, nothing beyond that. But beyond what we do, there are requirements for people to declare where they receive money, where they make donations, or where they receive donations. In case of Honorable Nxesi, it will be for him covered in the ethics requirements and disclosure requirements as a member of the executive. We have not found that there was malfeasance on his side. We have not found that he intended to benefit himself, and therefore our finding of no breach.
If we look at Mr. Cedric, go ahead, sir.
I do agree with you that sometimes it creates a reasonable suspicion of bias or conflict of interest when members act in this manner. However, as a committee and as a creature of statute, we have a responsibility to look at all facts objectively and without bias, and that is what we did in the committee.
In the instances that have existed, because the allegations as well against Ace Magashule, where he said the money went to students who were in need, and oftentimes this seems to be a loophole where one can point to an institution or an individual or a family that is in need and say that the funds were funneled to that institution and not directly to them. How do you ensure, indeed, that there are no loopholes there?
Yeah, let me just indicate that currently our code of conduct is not adequate to cover all other instances that arise. Remember that it is dated, it was only adopted on the 1st of November 2014 and may not have anticipated certain circumstances. We are overhauling that code of conduct, and Parliament is in the process of ensuring that such loopholes are closed in its consideration of all recommendations of the Zondo State Capture Report.
Let's look at the situation of Mr. Cedric Frolick now. The allegations against him and the reports against him was trying to elicit favor from Vincent Smith, involvement with Mr. Gavin Watson. Now, he wasn't really cleared per se in that the merits of his case were not broken down, they were not interrogated. And this, you say, is because these actions predated the actual code of ethics. How do you plan to deal with this? Does this mean it's the end of it just because it predated this particular act, and the act that existed before this, does it not make provision for these type of contraventions?
Yeah, in terms of Mr. Frolick and Honorable Frolick and Honorable Ngwenya, the applicable code was the one that was scheduled to the joint rules. And in terms of that code of the joint rules, we found that there is no breach on their side because there are no specific provisions for the types of malfeasances or allegations of malfeasance against them. For example, in relation to Honorable Frolick, these allegations related to him trying to influence Mr. Vincent Smith for favors. And the code, the schedule to the code of the joint rules do not cover this type of offences or malfeasance, and therefore there was no basis for us to arrive at a decision. Secondly, in his relation, he did declare his payment of his accommodation in OR Tambo. He also declared other assistance that he received from either the Watson's family or the Eastern Cape Rugby Union. Note that, and please note the following, that the committee is only interested in determining whether there was a breach of our code, and that is what the referral from the commission injected us to do, to check if there was a breach. However, the commission made a mistake by referring to the current code of ethics, which is not applicable, because these events took place in and around 2009, 10, and 11, and our code only came into effect on the 1st of November 2014. Secondly, in relation to that, there are serious allegations made in this report of the Commission. The Commission referred this in terms of its terms of reference 7 to law enforcement agencies to investigate and check if there is any further evidence that substantiates the allegations.
As we wrap up this morning, just a summary of the outcomes regarding Mosebenzi Zwane.
Honorable Mosebenzi Zwane, I must indicate that there are two aspects of the complaint. Firstly is that as chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Transport, he failed to exercise oversight. The committee found that we cannot attribute the oversight responsibilities to one member. This is a responsibility of the entire committee, and therefore the finding is unfounded. In relation to all other allegations related to his involvement as a member of executive responsible for minerals and energy, we did make findings against him on several breaches, which we tabled in Parliament and required him to apologize to Parliament. And as far as I remember, he had not proffered this apology to Parliament. But this is a matter between him and Parliament, and no longer a matter between us and him as a committee.
One thing that's very clear, Mr. Nkosi, is that you make recommendations. We are seeing Minister of Police Bekizwe saying he's actually going to take your recommendations under review. We're seeing the same thing with Floyd Shivambu. He is going to take your recommendations under review. Do you have any sort of enforcing authority, or are you there really just to make recommendations? And should members decide not to abide with your findings, that really there's no recourse for you?
Our only recourse is the National Assembly. Remember that when this matter is tabled before the National Assembly, this is the highest decision-making body in terms of members and legislation, and represents the people of the country, the citizens, the voting citizens of this country. And therefore, it is the highest sanction for us. Members have a responsibility to abide by decisions of the House. If they don't, then they have to provide a legal basis for not doing so. That is why they say, in their view, they will go and review our decisions. However, we are confident that there is no court of law that will find against us based on our thorough process.
So let me just verify this. You do not make recommendations. These are prescriptions that you give to them, that they have to actually abide by your findings.
Our recommendations are to the National Assembly. Once the National Assembly adopts our reports, these are instructions and prescriptions to members to abide by the decisions of the National Assembly.
We'll leave it at that for this morning. Thank you very much. That was Bekizwe Nkosi, the co-chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Ethics. I must say, Gareth, an institution, a body that is there but doesn't actually have the authority to enforce anything
and this is why it's being referred to as a whitewash, if you look at some of the commentary around this, because if it goes back to the National Assembly, it does become an issue around political parties and those who have the majority seats. So I love that question. What do you actually do? You make recommendations to the National Assembly, and then it does become a political thing. So while the committee might say it sits outside of politics, it can't, because the decisions ultimately that they're recommending, that they're prescribing, come from politicians.
They go back to the political party.
There's the problem.
So a semblance of justice. It looks like justice, but is it justice? It looks like a process to find the truth and to make just decisions. But is it really, or is it, as Gareth, you're saying, just to tick the boxes?
Just tick the boxes.
Done.
That's
We
some
move
of
on.
the critiques that have come out. I'm sure we're going to unpack that with some of those who are against how this has happened throughout the day here on ANC. A fantastic interview. If you missed part of it, I'm sure it'll be on YouTube shortly.